The stench of smoke and sweat hung heavy in the air as I sprinted through the trenches, the constant rattle of machine guns and the deafening boom of artillery fire threatening to consume me whole. The year was 1944, and the world was ablaze. I was embedded with a unit of Allied forces, tasked with documenting the war effort. But nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that unfolded on that fateful day. The ground beneath my feet trembled as a nearby explosion sent me tumbling to the dirt, my camera equipment scattered around me. As I struggled to regain my footing, a frantic voice crackled over the radio. "Enemy forces are pushing forward! We need to hold the line!" The fear was palpable, the uncertainty suffocating. It was in this moment, amidst the chaos and destruction, that I realized the true extent of the war's complexity. The Allies were fighting on multiple fronts, from the battle-scarred beaches of Normandy to the scorching deserts of North Africa. But it was the war of secrets, of deception and encryption, that would ultimately prove to be the decisive factor. As I caught my breath and began to make sense of the mayhem around me, my mind wandered back to the months leading up to this moment. The Allies had been gaining momentum, slowly but surely, but it was a fragile advantage, one that could be shattered at any moment by the enemy's superior firepower and tactical prowess. It was then that I began to grasp the significance of the codebreakers, those brilliant NT minds who toiled in secret, deciphering the enemy's encrypted messages, providing the Allies with a vital edge in the war of information. The work of these codebreakers, stationed at Bletchley Park in England, was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few. They were the unseen heroes, working tirelessly to unravel the complex web of enemy communications, providing the Allies with crucial intelligence on enemy troop movements, plans, and strategies. But as I delved deeper into the world of codebreaking, I began to realize that it was only half the story. The other half was the art of deception, the use of strategic psychological operations to mislead the enemy, to make them believe what we wanted them to believe. It was a delicate dance, one that required precision, creativity, and a deep understanding of the enemy's mindset. The Allies had been experimenting with various forms of deception, from fake radio transmissions to carefully crafted propaganda campaigns. But it was the combination of code-breaking and deception that held the key to unlocking a swifter Allied victory. To understand the true potential of this combination, it's essential to delve into the geopolitics of the time. The world was a complex web of alliances and rivalries, with multiple nations vying for power and influence. The Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan, had formed a formidable alliance, one that threatened to engulf the entire world in its quest for dominance. The Allies, comprising the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union among others, were determined to stop them. But it was a daunting task. The enemy was well entrenched, with a significant advantage in terms of manpower, resources, and strategic positioning. It was in this context that the art of code-breaking became a crucial factor. The Allies had been working tirelessly to crack the enemy's encryption codes, with significant breakthroughs achieved by the British at Bletchley Park. The most notable of these was the cracking of the Enigma code, a complex system used by the Germans to encrypt their communications. The Enigma machine, with its intricate system of rotors and wiring, was thought to be unbreakable, but a team of brilliant codebreakers, led by Alan Turing, had managed to crack the code, providing the Allies with a vital window into enemy communications. But codebreaking was only half the story. The other half was the use of strategic psychological operations to deceive the enemy, to make them believe what we wanted them to believe. The Allies had been experimenting with various forms of deception, from fake radio transmissions to carefully crafted propaganda campaigns. But it was the combination of code-breaking and deception that held the key to unlocking a swifter Allied victory. By combining the intelligence gleaned from code-breaking with carefully crafted deception campaigns, the Allies could create a powerful synergy, one that would allow them to outmaneuver the enemy, to anticipate their moves, and to stay one step ahead. As I reflected on the events of that fateful day, I began to realize the significance of the 10 minutes that changed the course of World War II. It was a brief window of time, a fleeting moment of opportunity, when the Allies could have potentially altered the outcome of the war. It was a moment when the combination of code-breaking and deception could have been used to devastating effect, to cripple the enemy's ability to respond, to create a decisive advantage on the battlefield. But it was a moment that was lost, a moment that slipped through our fingers like sand, leaving us to ponder what could have been. The technology of the time played a significant role in the war effort, with both sides investing heavily in the development of new weapons and communication systems. The Germans had developed the V-2 rocket, a powerful ballistic missile that could reach deep into enemy territory, while the Allies had developed the atomic bomb, a weapon of unprecedented destructive power. The war was being fought on multiple fronts, from the skies to the seas, with each side seeking to outmaneuver the other through a combination of strategy, tactics, and technology. But amidst all this chaos and destruction, it was the war of secrets, of deception and encryption, that would ultimately prove to be the decisive factor. The Allies had made significant strides in code-breaking, but it was the combination of code-breaking and deceptio that held the key to unlocking a swifter Allied victory. By using the intelligence gleaned from code-breaking to inform and shape their deception campaigns, the Allies could create a powerful synergy, one that would allow them to outmaneuver the enemy, to anticipate their moves, and to stay one step ahead. As I emerged from the trenches, blinking in the bright sunlight, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. The war was far from over, and the outcome was still uncertain. But one thing was clear. The combination of code-breaking and deception had the potential to be a game-changer, a decisive factor in the ultimate Allied victory. It was a potential that had been glimpsed, but not yet fully realized. A potential that would require careful planning, precise execution, and a deep understanding of the enemy's mindset. But as I looked out upon the ravaged landscape, I knew that it was a potential that could not be ignored. A potential that could change the course of history forever. As the German forces launched their assault on the Allied positions, the air was filled with the deafening roar of aircraft and the thunderous boom of artillery. The Luftwaffe, with its superior numbers and technological advancements, had gained air superiority, and their Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s dominated the skies. In response, the Allies scrambled their Supermarine Spitfires and North American P-51 Mustangs to engage the enemy aircraft. The initial skirmishes saw the German tanks, led by the formidable Panther and Tiger models, pushing forward with reckless abandon, their 88mm and 75mm guns blasting apart the Allied defenses. The Panther, with its sleek design and powerful engine, was a game-changer on the battlefield, capable of reaching speeds of up to 46 miles per hour and boasting a range of over 100 miles. The Tiger, on the other hand, was a behemoth, weighing over 50 tons, and armed with an 88mm gun that could penetrate even the thickest armor. As the German armor pushed forward, the Allies responded with a combination of infantry and armor of their own. The M4 Sherman, with its reliable 75mm gun and relatively lightweight design, proved to be a worthy opponent, but it was vastly outnumbered by the German tanks. The British Churchill tank, with its thick armor and 75mm gun, also played a significant role in the battle, but its slow speed and limited range made it vulnerable to the more agile German tanks. The battle raged on for hours, with both sides trading blows and neither gaining the upper hand. The Allies, however, had a secret weapon up their sleeve: the Hobart's Funnies, a group of modified Churchill tanks equipped with specialized equipment such as flamethrowers, mine clearers, and bridge layers. These tanks, led by the fearless Major General Percy Hobart, proved to be a turning point in the battle, as they were able to clear a path through the German minefields and breach the enemy lines. As the sun began to set on the battlefield, the Allies launched a final, desperate assault on the German positions. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions, and the ground shook beneath the feet of the soldiers as the tanks and artillery pounded away at the enemy lines. The German forces, however, refused to yield, and they fought on with a ferocity that bordered on madness. In the midst of this chaos, a small group of Allied soldiers, led by a young lieutenant, managed to sneak behind enemy lines and take out a key German artillery position. The lieutenant, a seasoned veteran of the North African campaign, had led his team with precision and skill, using the cover of darkness and the chaos of the battle to evade the enemy sentries and reach their target. With the artillery position neutralized, the Allies were able to gain a foothold on the German flank, and the tide of the battle began to turn in their favor. As the night wore on, the fighting continued, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Germans, however, were beginning to tire, and their lines were starting to waver. The Allies, sensing victory within their grasp, pushed forward with renewed energy, their tanks and infantry working together in perfect harmony. The Germans, on the other hand, were starting to fall back, their tanks and aircraft becoming increasingly disorganized as the Allies gained the upper hand. In the heat of the battle, a lone German Tiger tank, commanded by a grizzled and experienced crew, found itself face-to-face with a group of Allied Shermans. The Tiger, with its superior firepower and armor, should have been the dominant force. But the Shermans, using their speed and agility to outmaneuver the German tank, managed to exploit a weak point in the Tiger's armor and take it out. The loss of the Tiger was a significant blow to the German forces, and it marked a turning point in the battle. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the Allies launched a final, decisive assault on the German positions. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire and explosions, and the ground shook beneath the feet of the soldiers as the tanks and artillery pounded away at the enemy lines. The Germans, exhausted and demoralized, were unable to withstand the onslaught, and their lines began to collapse. The Allies, sensing victory within their grasp, pushed forward with renewed energy, their tanks and infantry working together in perfect harmony. The battle was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Allies had gained the upper hand, and the Germans were in full retreat. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the Allies continued to push forward, their tanks and infantry pouring through the gaps in the German lines like a tidal wave. The Germans, meanwhile, were in disarray, their tanks and aircraft becoming increasingly disorganized as they fell back in defeat. The stage was set for a final, decisive confrontation, one that would determine the course of the war and the fate of the world. The aftermath of the decisive 10 minutes that changed the course of World War II was a complex and multifaceted period, marked by both jubilation and devastation. As the news of the Allied victory spread, the world breathed a collective sigh of relief, knowing that the worst of the war was finally behind them. However, the true extent of the damage and the long-term consequences of the conflict were only just beginning to emerge. The turning point of the war, which occurred during those fateful 10 minutes, was the result of a combination of factors. The bravery and cunning of the Allied forces, combined with the strategic mistakes of the Axis powers, ultimately led to the decisive victory. The successful landing of troops on the beaches of Normandy, the cracking of the German Enigma code, and the relentless bombing campaigns against key German cities all played a significant role in weakening the enemy's defenses. However, it was the bold and daring operation, codenamed Operation Overlord, that proved to be the final nail in the coffin for the Axis powers. As the dust settled, the Allies began to assess the damage and plan for the rebuilding of Europe. The war had left deep scars, both physical and emotional, and it would take years, if not decades, for the continent to recover. The Soviet Union, which had borne the brunt of the war, had suffered unimaginable losses, with estimates suggesting that over 20 million people had lost their lives. The United States, which had entered the war relatively late, had also suffered significant losses, but its economy and infrastructure had emerged relatively unscathed. The United Kingdom, which had been bombed relentlessly by the Germans, was left to pick up the pieces and rebuild its shattered cities. The legacy of the 10 minutes that changed World War II is still felt today. The war marked a significant turning point in the history of warfare, as it introduced new technologies, tactics, and strategies that would go on to shape the course of modern conflict. The development of atomic bombs, jet engines, and radar systems all played a significant role in the war, and their impact can still be seen in modern military arsenals. The war also marked the beginning of the Cold War, as the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as superpowers, engaged in a decades-long struggle for ideological supremacy. The impact of the war on the world order was also profound. The formation of the United Nations, the European Union, and other international organizations was a direct response to the devastation of the war, as nations sought to create a framework for preventing future conflicts. The war also led to the redrawing of national borders, as the map of Europe was reconfigured to reflect the new balance of power. The creation of Israel, the division of Germany, and the formation of the Eastern Bloc all owed a debt to the outcome of the war. In the years and decades that followed, the world struggled to come to terms with the legacy of the war. The Nuremberg trials, which held top Nazi officials accountable for their crimes, marked an important milestone in the development of international law. The formation of the State of Israel, which provided a homeland for the Jewish people, was a direct response to the horrors of the Holocaust. The war also led to a significant shift in the global balance of power, as the United States emerged as a dominant world power, and the Soviet Union became a major player on the world stage. Today, as we look back on the 10 minutes that changed World War II, we are reminded of the devastating consequences of war and the importance of working towards peace. The war marked a significant turning point in human history, as it introduced new technologies, new ideologies, and new global alliances. The legacy of the war can still be seen in the modern world, from the ongoing conflict in the Middle East to the rising tensions between major world powers. As we move forward in an increasingly complex and interconnected world, it is essential that we remember the lessons of the past and work towards creating a more just and peaceful world for all. The bravery and sacrifice of those who fought and died during the war will never be forgotten, and their legacy will continue to inspire future generations. The 10 minutes that changed World War II will always be remembered as a pivotal moment in human history, a moment that marked the beginning of the end of one of the darkest periods in human history. As we honor the memory of those who fought and died, we must also recognize the importance of working towards a more peaceful and prosperous world, where such conflicts are never repeated. The aftermath of the war serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of conflict and the importance of striving for peace, justice, and freedom for all.